Tēnā koutou katoa ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Welcome to ATEPS 2021. Ko Jennifer Curtin toko ingoa. I'm Director of the Public Policy Institute who's hosting this event. This is just some pre-conference technicalities before I hand over to Michael Steedman for the formal mihi whakatau. So I wanted to let you know that this is on air, the virtual platform that we are using, and it has a live Q&A function, which you should feel free to use throughout the conference. There's also a meeting hub area, which you can go to do your networking and have one-on-one conversations with other delegates. There's technical support that you can access throughout the conference. So you just look for the red person at the top of the right-hand side of your screen. And somebody will be able to come in from event services and help with any technical support you need there. Just a reminder that there's some bonus sessions that are attached to this conference. We have 4 international speakers who've done pre-records for us relating to all topics about the economics of trade and the global reset. So please make use of those. And just remember that the content from all of this conference is available for 1 month after the end. So you will have plenty of time to access sessions if you miss them for any reason. So it now gives me great pleasure to welcome Michael Steedman, Ngāti Whātua and our Kairahi from and Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor Māori from the University of Auckland, Waipapa Taumataro. Michael.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko whakarau ke mai nei I rungi te kaupapa o te rā. Aku mihi kia koutou katoa, ka huri taku reo. Ki tērā a ngā reo o tōku tupuna, John Manford Steedman, haka mara mai tātou katoa mo te wāpoto. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Steedman. I'm the kaiarataki I Waipapa Taumataro, the University of Auckland, and I'm about to offer a mihi whakatau, some words of welcome. So I'll be speaking in Te Reo Māori. But just note that I'll provide a brief explanation afterwards, and that this is a traditional greeting, which acknowledges you, the participant of the conference, and all of your families and all of the people that have arranged things for us to be here today. Nā reira, kei te mihi kia koutou katoa, māku tīmata I te karakia. Tērā ia te mātauranga te pākuru mai nei he ruru tau, he ruru matu ua, he ruru tawhitoki nei pukanga ki nei wānanga kia e aki ai te tohunga anō ko te tohunga rangi. Ki te wai o tū, ko te wai whakaike, ko te wai te tau I rā. He wai tapu, he wai nui, he wai ora, ka pepe, ka wawai, ka pōra tū, te mokapu taurarangi e. He areki he tupua, ka puta ki te whaiau, puta ki te ao mārama, whanno, tau mai te mauri, haumi e, hui e, tāki e, he hate hau e wawara mai, he tiu he raki, he tiu he raki. Nāna ia mai te puputara ki hiki ota. E tikina atu e au te kōtu ko I te pauwhakaruka tū ki te wai te mata, I oku wairangi, te hea wā mauri ora. I aku nui, I aku rahi, I aku muka tangata ko rangi tāmiro tia nei I rungi te hui a kai manoa kaupapa. A tēnā koutou, nau mai, hara mai, hara mai. Nau mai ki waianui a tātou tēnei whānau, Waipapa Taumataro, nau mai. Hara mai hoki I rungi te karanga o te rā, tēnei kaupapa tau hoko, me ngā tini kōrero puta noa, ngā kokonga o te ao, kokonga o tēnei iko o Māui, tēnei wāhi o tātou Aotearoa, nau mai. Tuatahi, ki ngā tini whakapono o wainganui a koutou, e tika nā me mihi atu ki a koutou ki tēnei rā. Ki ngā tini mate, haere atu rā. Rātou e noho pohara, rātou e whānau e pani ana, rātou e tangi ana tonu, mō rātou ko hiki te pō e ngā mata katoa haere atu rā. Rātou ki a rātou, noho ki tērā ngā kāinga manahua, tātou ki a tātou ki tēnei Aotearoa, a tēnā koutou katoa, no ki te honore, ki te taha Waipapa Taumataro, ki te tuku I nei kōrero. Kia koutou, no kua noa te honore, ki te tuku I nei kupu mai a Ngāti Whātua o Lākei, e tūru atu o mātou ringa kia koutou ki tēnei wā. Kei te mihi, me koro e noa, ka noho haumaru koutou, I roti tēnei wā te rereke o te āhotanga o ngā rā I mo I a tātou. Ka huri. Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. It's my privilege on behalf of Waipapa Taumatarau to offer these words of welcome to you all here. For this conference, in this unusual time, where we get the opportunity in roles such as mine to share part of our customary practices of this place, Aotearoa, Tāmaki Makaurau, on behalf of my tribe, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, on behalf of the university, the Vice-Chancellor, our Provost, that is here with us this morning, and our Deputy Vice-Chancellor as well. A big part of the welcome, of course, is to acknowledge not just you, the participants sitting at the other end of the screen, but your families, your shared histories, so that we can connect together under this particular kaupapa, tauhoko hoko, something Māori people of Aotearoa have been practicing for centuries. And so with that, and with the idea of legacy, long-standing traditions and conversations for things like trade, tauhoko hoko, I offer these words of welcome to you here today. I want to acknowledge our Provost, Te Ahorangi, Valerie Lin, who I'll be handing over shortly after this, as one of our leaders connected here to help kick things off. And in particular, I want to acknowledge our ministers that arrived today and over the next couple of days, as well as Her Excellency, the British High Commissioner. So with that, kei te mihi kia koutou katoa, kia pai tō koutou conference, kia pai te tini wānanga kei roto, kei te mihi kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. For those of our international visitors, in particular, it's custom in these parts to sing a waiata or sing a song after you speak. So the invitation is there. If any of you are keynote speakers, workshop leaders, you have the opportunity to sing a waiata, and you'll be looked upon favourably by the locals. So here's my waiata. Ki te mihi kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou. Pāpaki mai, langaru nunui, wāwaratia, ngā tairere, e ripo e, ngangaru nunui te reudai, hei konei rā. Tēnā tātou katoa. That song is about a young girl waiting for her father to return to shore from fishing. So she's describing everything that she sees in front of her, the waves washing over on the shore, the water swirling, and the boats coming in. So in that spirit, I'll now hand over to ki tō tātou amo kapua, Professor Valerie Lin.
Hello, I'm Valerie Lin, the Provost here at the University of Auckland, and it gives me a very great pleasure to welcome you to Waipapa Taumatarau, the University of Auckland. On behalf of the University, the Vice-Chancellor, I'd really like to welcome you to this, our third Auckland Trade and Economic Policy School. We have more than 45 speakers here over the course of the next 2 days, and this year's event promises to deliver some valuable and thought-provoking insights in what the trade reset really means for Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the Pacific region, given the geopolitical context and the ongoing policy challenges presented by COVID-19. Before handing over to Professor Robert Greenberg, Dean of the Faculty of Arts, I want to acknowledge and thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, particularly the Auckland office, for continuing to partner with us at ATEPS 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you also to all of our speakers and chairs for taking time out to share your knowledge. And a very warm welcome to our distinguished guests from the various embassies and consular corps, and to all of you who are listening in. I hope you enjoy the next 2 days. Kia ora. And Robert, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e nā karangatanga maha. Neira te mihi atu kia koutou katoa. Tihe moriora. I'm Robert Greenberg, Manukura Te Toitanata, the Dean of Arts, and I'm really delighted to welcome you to ATEPS 2021, the Auckland Trade and Economic Policy School. As Valerie mentioned, it is the third time that the Faculty of Arts and the Public Policy Institute, which is where the Public Policy Institute is located, is hosting this event. And we really are sad that we can't see you in person, but again, these lockdown conditions have made this a virtual conference. The Faculty of Arts is home to many of the disciplines which I think are relevant to the conversations today. We have international relations, Maori studies, Pacific studies, global studies, area studies, and we have the disciplines that really impact issues around our trade policies and our economic stability and well-being. Over the past 5 years, our Public Policy Institute has been engaging in this area of endeavor, and we are really delighted to be here with the third edition of the Auckland Trade and Economic Policy School. Sorry again that we cannot see you in person, but I think you'll have a wonderful couple of days, and I wish you a wonderful conference. I hope it is productive and that you make new contacts despite not being able to see each other in person. I want to say a big thank you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Trade, the Public Policy Institute, for all the work that's gone into preparing for this conference. No reira, huri noa e tō tātou. Hui topa, tēnā koto, tēnā koto, tēnā tātou katoa. I'm now going to hand it over to Dr. Eric Lithander, our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Strategic Engagement, who will introduce our keynote speaker. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Robert. Tēnā koto, tēnā koto, tēnā koto katoa. Ko Eric Lithander ahau, ko o te ihurua, ko tui tangata I waipapa tō rau. Tēnā hoki ko e te Honore Minita Damien O'Connor, ngā mihi nui. Tēnā tātou katoa. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the University of Auckland and to the Auckland Trade and Economic Policy School. My name is Eric Lithander. I have the privilege of being the university's Deputy Vice Chancellor for Strategic Engagement. And this morning, it's my privilege to introduce a very special speaker, the Minister for Trade and Export Growth, the Honorable Damien O'Connor. Minister O'Connor took up his portfolio in 2020, and he is also the Minister for Agriculture, Biosecurity, Land Information, and Rural Communities. Mr. O'Connor has had a busy year since he last addressed the Auckland Trade and Economic Policy School in December 2020. In addition to this, his involvement in a range of Apec events, he has represented Aotearoa Offshore in support of the trade recovery strategy, and he has been working to advance a number of critical items on New Zealand's trade agenda this year, including the newly agreed UK-New Zealand FTA. No doubt these are some of the topics that the Minister will cover in his speech to us today. We are looking forward to hosting the Minister in person at the University of Auckland, as we understand that he's eager to develop more dialogue around trade policy here in Tamaki Makarau. But on this occasion, we will need to meet virtually, so please join me in welcoming the Honourable Damien O'Connor to your screen.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you for the introduction. It's fantastic to be participating in the third Auckland Trade and Economic Policy School, albeit virtually from MIQ, following a whirlwind trip reconnecting with some of our key partners overseas. New Zealand's position on international trade continues to be informed by events like the Auckland Trade and Economic Policy School and the entire trade ecosystem of academics, business people, and trade professionals who have been fundamental to the evolution of New Zealand's trade agenda. With that in mind, I'd like to thank the University of Auckland Public Policy Institute, and in particular, Professor Jennifer Curtin and Dr. Susan Woodward for organising today's conference. The relationship between our trade officials and the Institute continues to go from strength to strength, with the Institute students this year having contributed to officials' thinking in how to remove barriers to trade for women and increase small and medium enterprise exports. Many of the next generation of trade experts will begin their careers here, and I know a number of the Institute's graduates now work for MFAT or other government agencies, and I'm sure they will serve New Zealand well. We are working hard to progress important issues internationally in an increasingly challenging global environment. Geopolitical competition and trade are becoming more and more intertwined, and it is threatening the rules-based trade order that we value. Increasing protectionism and the weakening of important international organisations is a concerning trend we need to address. We should not be content with simply preserving the status quo. Instead, we should continue to prioritise progress on issues like the environment, labour rights, gender equality, and Indigenous economies. Trade policy must benefit all New Zealanders, and our Trade for All agenda seeks to do so. We will be best served by a trade policy that is consultative, inclusive, and recognises the role and voice and views of Māori as treaty partners. We need trade policy that ensures it supports all New Zealanders and is deliberate in supporting SMEs, Māori, and women-led business to succeed. I've been talking to my colleagues around the world about the importance of these initiatives, and we are making great progress, but we should be realistic that it will take some time to secure all these outcomes. Last December at this conference, I explained this government's priorities in what was then, and still is now, an unparalleled international crisis. The priorities were, firstly, keep New Zealanders safe from COVID-19. Secondly, accelerate our economic recovery. And thirdly, lay the foundations for a better future. 1 year on, these priorities remain relevant, but just as the virus has evolved, so has our response. Government agencies have rolled out significant programs of work in the past 12 months to help businesses stay connected to offshore markets and accelerate our economic recovery. We have, firstly, worked to ensure critical global supply chains remain open and resilient, including through our managed international air connectivity scheme. We've also continued to increase access to markets through agreements like our UK FTA. We've doubled the number of companies receiving intensive support through NZTE's high engagement focused portfolio from 700 to 1,437 businesses. We've increased NZTE's team of in-market experts, our boots on the ground in key growth markets overseas, and increased co-investment funding for companies growing overseas through the International Growth Fund, doubling the size of the fund from 30 million to 60 million per year. Just last month, I visited Dairy Collective in London, which has used IGF money to expand its business in Europe. But many challenges remain for New Zealand exporters. Labour and talent shortages, border restrictions, supply chain disruptions all remain significant obstacles, but we continue our work to deliberately and carefully reconnect New Zealand to the world while ensuring we keep New Zealanders safe from COVID-19. On Apec and WTO, we are laying the foundations of a better future by working hard to ensure we remain connected with other markets, and we're committed to fostering the multilateral organisations that are central to New Zealand's economic prosperities, such as Apec and the WTO. New Zealand has just concluded our successful hosting of Apec. This year, at the Apec Ministers Responsible for Trade meeting, MRT, that I chaired, all Apec economies agreed to work to reduce the barriers for vaccines to move across borders, critical as we all work to address the challenges of COVID-19. We also achieved great gains on the digitisation of trade processes. Significantly, we were also able to secure commitment to halt the increase in subsidies to fossil fuels and brought Indigenous economies to the forefront of Apec for the first time ever. I know you'll all be hearing more about our Apec successes tomorrow from this year's Apec senior official, Vangelis Vitalis. In addition to Apec, the WTO is crucial for New Zealand's long-term trade and economic interests, and its continued effective functioning remains one of our core trade policy priorities. The international system of trade rules, with the WTO at its centre, has allowed New Zealand to economically compete with the biggest and the mightiest nations in the world. It has evened the playing field and allows us to thrive as a small export-orientated economy. That's why I was planning to travel to Geneva to represent New Zealand at the WTO Ministerial Conference, where ministers from around the world would have come together for the first time since 2017. Unfortunately, I got as far as London when I heard that the meeting was postponed due to the discovery of Omicron variant, which was a significant disappointment. The emergence of Omicron variant further underlines the need for a trade response to the pandemic and to improve global vaccine access. No one is safe from the virus until everyone is safe from it. So it is in all of our interests to remove any blocks to access and distribution of the vaccine. We support the waiver of IP protections on vaccines and an overall trade and health package at the WTO that meaningfully responds to the pandemic. As we work towards rescheduled dates for MC12 next year, New Zealand will continue to seek the meaningful conclusion of long-standing WTO fisheries subsidies negotiations. Global reform of these subsidies is essential because of their harmful effects on resources, on the environment, on trade and livelihoods. Establishing effective disciplines will also improve the competitiveness of New Zealand's already unsubsidised fishing industry. We will also push for an outcome that sets the foundation for negotiations to limit trade and production distorting agricultural domestic subsidies. Such reform is key to achieving global food systems that are economically, socially and environmentally sustainable, as well as meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. Achieving this will also pave the way for an even playing field for New Zealand's agricultural exports, so our unsubsidised agricultural exporters have improved access to markets globally, and also for many of the world's developing countries who are excluded from markets due to these subsidies. Finally, we will work to find a credible pathway for the reform of the appellant body, which is so critical to the WTO. Uncertainty about MC12 dates will not keep us from working on these issues and other priorities such as fossil fuel subsidy reform. In fact, I'm delighted that we have been able to announce the conclusion of negotiations on domestic regulation and services alongside 66 other WTO members. These negotiations were aimed at reducing administrative costs and creating a more transparent operating environment for service providers hoping to do business in foreign markets. Once implemented, this will provide certainty for our service exporters as part of our trade-led recovery. While multilateral fora like Apec and the WTO provide a foundation for New Zealand's economic engagement globally, they are not our only focus. High quality, commercially meaningful free trade agreements open up new markets for our exporters and have also been a key focus for me this year and will continue to be so as we move into 2022. I travelled to Europe several times this year to advance our free trade agreement negotiations with the UK and the EU. And I'm pleased that we have reached an agreement in principle with the United Kingdom. This agreement will boost New Zealand's GDP by almost $1 billion and provide unprecedented access for New Zealand exporters to the UK. And I look forward to moving towards signing of the agreement in the new year. Negotiators continue to work towards an agreement with the European Union, And as I'm sure you'll agree, a comprehensive EU-New Zealand free trade agreement is well overdue. But I've been open that issues such as geographical indicators and good markets access still need work before the deal can be done. And I'm hopeful that we'll see progress next year. When the UK and EU FTAs are implemented, the proportion of our goods and services trade that are covered by an FTA will increase from 62% to around 75% of our total exports. The CPTPP grouping is also welcoming Peru, which has just become New Zealand's newest FTA partner and just our third Latin American FTA partner. Work continues on our other suite of agreements, including the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement, DEPA, which I'm delighted Korea is now seeking to join. The Agreement for Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability, where round 7 negotiations have just concluded, and of course RCEP, which will come into force from the 1st of January next year. And of course, we continue to work with our major trading partners, including our closest partner, Australia, of course, as we continue to enhance the Australia-New Zealand Closer Economic Relationships Trade Agreement, CER, the most successful bilateral trade agreement in the world. I recently met with Australian Trade Minister Tihan in Melbourne to discuss CER, which will see its 40th anniversary in 2023. Our biggest trading partner, China, as we work towards entry into force of an FTA upgrade, which we signed earlier this year, will be a huge step forward. And of course, the US, we welcome their recent proposal to develop an Indo-Pacific economic framework. And I appreciated the chance to discuss it with US Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, in Singapore recently, alongside Australia and Singapore. Increased US economic and trade engagement in our region is important for our recovery and will help advance the rules-based and open trading system that our businesses rely on. The government's actively working on a number of other areas to support exporters. These include internationalisation efforts in the industry transformation plans, including MB's Advanced Manufacturing Industry Transformation Plan. I've made it a priority of mine this year to get out and meet some of these advanced manufacturing exporters where COVID allowed. And I was pleased to be able to visit Buckley Systems, Quantify Photonics, and Fisher & Paykel Healthcare to better understand how the government can further support New Zealand's move from volume to values. MFAT has also enhanced its exporter tools, expanding its market reporting from our offshore network of embassies, while also continuing to support businesses in resolving non-tariff barriers to accessing offshore markets. The final thing I want to touch on is how hugely important consultation is to get the most effective policy making. This is why we launched new engagement mechanisms this year, and it was great to be able to meet exporters at the All of Government Trade Policy roadshows, which are bringing together exporters with those New Zealand Inc. agencies which support trade. Officials have also held regular Zoom briefings to support trade for non-agricultural and manufacturing exporters. The government also reaffirmed its partnerships this year with key bodies like Export NZ and the Europe NZ and ASEAN NZ business councils. And I thoroughly enjoyed connecting with several international business councils this year, including the Africa New Zealand Business Council a few months ago, even though the engagement came to a dramatic end with the fire alarm and building evacuation. And of course, we've made it clear that there needs to be greater engagement with Māori, which has seen an uptake in cooperation and consultation with a range of treaty partners, including Te Taumata, Federation of Māori Authorities, National Iwi Chairs Forum, and the emerging Ngātoki Whakaranguru to incorporate Māori interests and priorities in our trade agenda. I was particularly pleased that we were able to secure UK agreement to include an Indigenous chapter in our FTA with them. We've come a long way and had significant achievements this year, but there's still mahi to do. I am looking forward to hearing how this year's ATEPS goes and all the ideas that the conference will generate to help strengthen New Zealand trade policy to become even more inclusive, sustainable and fitting for an Aotearoa at the forefront of inclusive trade policy. There is so much opportunity out there from which New Zealand can continue to benefit. As I've said a number of times over recent months, trade is the solution. Thank you all very much for your time today, and a special thanks again to Auckland University Public Policy Institute, including Professor Jennifer Curtin and Dr. Suzanne Woodward all of you for tuning in online. Kia ora.